Okay. Wait out. Mr. Small is up for his motion.
Okay, I thought that when you went back into
Yeah, when you go into public session,
Public session.
it's like clean
Start
slate,
anew.
I thought. Anyway.
Go ahead, Cliff.
Chair, I'd like to move a motion, please.
Yes, Mr. Morrissey.
Camera, right? We were in camera, and then we came out to public part of it. Nothing that was being conducted in camera carries automatically to the public parts, does it?
Well, we were with Mr. Small, and then we returned to Mr. Small. But it's at the discretion of the chair.
Okay. Mr. Small, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to present this motion that given that after 9 years and 6 ministers of fisheries, Justin Trudeau's Liberal government has betrayed harvesters and made a mess of Newfoundland and Labrador's inshore fishery. The Liberal government, has ignored Canadian fish harvesters and is not listening to their concerns. The Fish Food and Allied Workers Union has recently stated that the federal Liberal government has completely and utterly failed our province and the recovery of the great northern cod stock, and that because Canadian fish harvesters need their voices to be heard so that those who are adjacent and reliant on this stock can reap the benefits of their 32 years of conservation efforts, the committee began a study of at least 4 meetings into the impact of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government's betrayal of Canadian fish harvesters, and that the meeting consists of 1 2-hour meeting with the Honourable Diane Labouthier, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, 1 2-hour meeting with officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, 1 2-hour meeting with the Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union, and at least 1 meeting with stakeholders deemed relevant to the subject, and that the committee report its findings to the House. Thank you.
Any discussion on that motion? Mr. Kellaway.
I would like to make some suggested amendments if possible. So I'll start off by remove, after 9 years and 6 fisheries ministers, Justin Trudeau's Liberal government has betrayed harvesters and made a mess of Newfoundland and Labrador's inshore fishery. The Liberal government has ignored Canadian fish harvesters and is not listening to their concerns. Remove that Canadian fish harvesters need their voices heard so that those who are adjacent and reliant on this stock can reap the benefits of their 32 years of conservation efforts. And replace it with that cod is a culturally, socially, and economically significant fishery that impacts many coastal communities in Newfoundland and Labrador. Remove 4, replace with 2. Remove of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government's betrayal of Canadian harvesters, and that the meeting consists of 1 2-hour meeting with the Honourable Diane Labouthier, Minister of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, 1 2-hour meeting with officials from the Department of Fisheries, Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard, 1 2-hour meeting with Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union, FFAW, Unifor, and at least 1 meeting with stakeholders deemed relevant to the subject, and replace with reopening of the cod fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador. Add, and pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee asked that the government provide a comprehensive response to the report. So I'll read it, the new version. Given that the Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union, FFAW Unifor, has recently stated that the federal Liberal government has completely and utterly failed our province and the recovery of the great northern cod stock, and that cod is a culturally, socially and economically significant fishery that impacts many coastal communities in Newfoundland and Labrador. The committee began a study of at least 2 meetings into the impact of the reopening of the cod fishery on Newfoundland and Labrador, and that the committee report its finding to the House, and pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee asked the government provide a comprehensive response to the report.
Any discussion on that motion?
Can we just suspend to review it for a moment?
For a few seconds? Or a few minutes?
A few minutes.
Okay.
Seconds is a little short. but-
2 minutes. 2 minutes. We'll suspend for 2 minutes. Now, where were we? Your motion, yeah. Ms. Barron and then you. Bobby?
Yes.
Ladies first.
No. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. I wanted to propose a sub-amendment to MP Kellaway's amendment. And I'm sorry, I don't have it written out exactly, so I might need some help from the clerk. But ultimately, it's at the very end of MP Kellaway's motion. It says, at the end of the first paragraph, the committee began a study of at least 2 meetings into the impacts of the reopening of the cod fishery on Newfoundland and Labrador. I'd like to remove 2 meetings and replace that with 4 meetings. And I would like to add after that, and that this study began immediately interspersed with the derelict and abandoned vessels study, so that they can we can have meetings on both of these topics as witnesses are available, so that they're both being taken care of, but recognizing that this is time sensitive.
Okay, so basically it's instead of 2 meetings, 4, and you want it to intertwine with the derelict vessel study?
Thank you.
Right. Okay. So do we alternate, do you want it alternated from one meeting to the next, or do,
However,
yeah, okay.
yeah, I'm flexible.
All right, we've heard the amendment by Ms. Barron,
Sub-amendment.
sub-amendment. Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and nice to see everyone again. I think that's a good compromise. I think we've done it before. We've done 2 studies simultaneously, and given that we need to sort of find the spacing for the witnesses in both studies, it gives the clerk some flexibility to work which one on which day works best with regard to which witnesses are available. And I think this is a critical issue. You know, we've had a fishery that's been closed essentially to commercial fishery since 1992, 32 years, and the main harvesting stakeholders are not happy with the decision. And I know that everyone expected across the country when they saw the national media stories that commercial fishery is back, isn't this wonderful? The cod fishery is back, as the media reported it. But we're probably surprised to learn that the union representing the harvesters and a lot of scientists and others were concerned about 2 aspects of this. The one aspect being the move from 13,000 to 18,000 and the allowance by the government to have NAFO vessels, most likely Spanish and Portuguese, on the edge of our waters again, fishing cod, which I understand are there now. These are the countries that contributed to the collapse in the early 90s significantly. And this is a very, very urgent issue as the fishing is going on now. So I think MP Barron's sub-amendment to MP Kellaway's amendment to MP Small's motion is a valuable compromise.
Mr. Morrissey, and I apologize for not going to you after Ms. Barron, as I said I would.
Chair, it was the amendment of Mr. Kellaway that I wish to speak to. I have no problem with Ms. Barron's sub-amendment, but
Okay, do you still want to speak to Mr. Kellaway's amendment?
can we do that while there's a sub-amendment?
Do the sub-amendment first, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Reynolds.
I just want to clarify, I believe I heard Ms. Barron state that the study be started immediately. Is that correct? Yeah.
And I'm concurring.
Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it's very important that we stick with the original motion's direction to have at least 4 meetings, because this northern cod fishery is extremely important to Newfoundland and Labrador. and to cut the number of meetings down from 4 to 2 is a complete injustice to those who make their living on the water in Newfoundland and Labrador and who've been hurting. And they've been hurting, and who knows what the future is. The fishery's up and down every year, so we have to make sure that we're doing the right thing for this stock. And given the track record of foreign nations, of some NAFO member countries, in terms of overfishing outside our 200-mile limit and sneaking in across, and last year the enforcement days by DFO patrol vessels was in less than half of the 7-year running average. So I think the dangers of NAFO countries getting up to their old tricks again and stealing our fish as a result of this decision to move the stewardship fishery to a commercial fishery, it puts the future recovery of our northern cod stock in great jeopardy. So I think to give something as important as this to Newfoundland and Labrador and the fishing industry, only 2 meetings would be a great injustice. So I support the sub-amendment of Ms. Barron to have 4 meetings and carry on from there. Thank you.
Ms. Barron.
Thank you. It sounds like we're wrapping up the discussion on the sub-amendment, so I just wanted to add a quick point. First of all, there's a reason why I got right down to the meetings. I mean, honestly, we could, and I'm glad to see that we have everybody in agreement, it sounds like. We'll see how this vote's moving forward in the right direction. But honestly, it's interesting reading what's coming forward in these motions because, you know, just a reminder, I grew up in Newfoundland and was very much there during the time that the Conservatives were in government, in power. For how many years was that? 11 years? 8 years that they were in power. And firsthand felt the impacts of the prioritization of large corporations, of putting the interest of local fishers on the back burner. And so I want us to really make sure that we are taking the time to have a thorough discussion here and not just a Band-Aid solution. My family is not the only family that picked up and moved away from Newfoundland as a result of the impacts of the cod moratorium and the neglect of the government allowing overfishing to happen for generations. We knew that this was coming. And so now we're in a position where we're seeing the Liberal government making the same mistakes that the Conservatives did before them. And so it is a mess. And I'd like for us to look at the bigger picture of what's happening here and make sure that we get people with real lived experience who are out on the boats, who live in these coastal communities, to hear from them and implement real solutions to avoid us continuing to go in this cycle of putting local fishers' best interests last and putting corporate interests first. And so I just want to highlight that I'm not overly concerned about the introduction because I think as long as we're getting the right people at the table and we're putting into place long-term solutions that benefit the good people of Newfoundland and Labrador, that's the approach that we need to be taking. And so I do really hope that we look at 4 meetings because 2 is certainly not going to give this topic the justice that it requires.
Mr. Kellaway.
Yeah, listen, it's great to see the art of compromise here. Look, 4 meetings to focus on cod is exceptionally important. I'll grant you that, and thanks for making that overture to looking at broadening the study in terms of industry writ large over the past number of years. The other thing I want to say, and look, I know we're back here, and we're back into the rough and tumble days of my minority government. There isn't, I don't know of an MP that doesn't not only deeply appreciate the cod industry and what it means to Newfoundland and Labradorians, but to at least, among these folks here in the fisheries, how important it is. And so, look, let's study that. Let's look at derelict vessels, as we suggested. And I would also say this. We should keep in mind that, we can't invent more time, but, the review of the Fisheries Act is really, really important, and I think speaks to a lot of what's being talked about here. How do we collectively put recommendations that are going to strengthen key points? I would suggest that there's some great connections between parties and what should go into recommendations. But there also might be some nuances here. On this side, we're open to looking at those as well. So I think in the next little bit, doing it concurrently, the derelict vessels, the COD study, and also then getting into the Fisheries Act will be exceptionally important for this committee, and I dare say this Parliament. This is an important act that we need to strengthen, and I look forward to getting to that one too.
Madame Debienne.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I agree well enough with the formalities proposed by Ms. Barron when it comes to the 4 meetings. I also agree with the spirit of the motion. I would simply like that we add Quebec and Saint Laurent because there's also cod fishing taking place in Quebec. My father, 25 years ago, had already foreseen a moratorium, and he told us, go ahead, take advantage and eat. Eat it now because it's over. There's a moratorium on the way. So I think that it's important to add Quebec and Saint Laurent, the St. Lawrence River, in the study. And in the wording, we should add Quebec and the consequences of this increase in fish stocks on the St. Lawrence River. So I do not know if you want an official version of my proposal or if we should simply discuss it.
For a moment, Madame Debienne,
Oui.
until she gets speak to someone. Okay. Suspended. Let's deal with Madame Debienne's sub. Miss Barron. Miss Barron. Okay. Yes, the sub-amendment from Miss Barron. Everybody okay with the intent of Miss Barron's motion as given? Okay, good. Now we'll go on to Madame Debienne's sub-amendment to that. When you're ready, Miss Barron, Madame Debienne.
Oh, je peux déjà, ça s'est réglé vite.
That was settled very fast. You're very efficient. So my sub-amendment is as follows, that we add the notion of Quebec when we are talking about cod, because you also have cod in St. Lawrence River when it comes to recreational activities and others. So if we were to look at the wording proposed by Mr. Calloway, we could add at the end of the reopening of the cod fishery on Newfoundland and Labrador and in Quebec. So the reopening of the cod fishery on Newfoundland and Labrador and in Quebec, where, given that reopening has consequences on the stock in the St. Lawrence River in Quebec. and also that this could be the case for all types of fish elsewhere in Canada and in Quebec. So this could endanger future fish stocks in the future.
Amendment, or sub-amendment rather. Any problems or issues with it? Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to actually see it so I could read it and see what it really means. And we might need a couple of minutes to look at the content of that and to investigate it, please.
We can suspend for a
Thank you.
couple of minutes and get it on paper and send it out to everyone.
Okay.
Suspend it. People put their earpieces on, they'll get it translated in English.
Sorry, Chair, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Can you read your motion again in French, and translation will translate it for anyone who wants to hear it in English? If you want to hear it in French, they can listen to it.
Alors, nous voulons ajouter à la fin du
To the end of the last paragraph of the motion by Mr. Callaway that ends with Newfoundland and Labrador, we would like to add, as well as Quebec, as this could have repercussions on the stocks in the St. Lawrence River. We could stop there because I talked with Mr. Morrissey and we could stop there simply. That would work for me. Simply because the Gulf and the river, well, they go together.
The sub-amendment, Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I could support that sub-amendment because there's absolutely no connection between cod in the Gulf of St. Lawrence estuary and cod on Canada's eastern continental shelf, northern cod 2J3KL. So it's technically imprudent. So I think that the motion to the sub-amendment should stand as is, because scientifically there's no connection between that stock and the Gulf of St. Lawrence, in that part of the Gulf of St. Lawrence especially, with the northern cod. Thank you.
Madame Desbiens.
C'est précisément ce
It's specifically what the study could reveal or not. I think we cannot simply claim that there's no link, whereas I've fished cod in the St. Lawrence River when I was young. Is it the same cod? Is it not the same? Does such industrial fishing have repercussions or not? So that's my position.
Mr. Morrissey, and then Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Chair, I disagree with Mr. Small because if you look at his original motion, the intent, he keeps referencing Canadian fish harvesters in his motion because Canadian fish harvesters need their voices heard. That's all Madame Desbiens is asking is to a cod. There is a difference, but this study should focus on the scientific and the data. I'll speak to that more when I get my turn on the motion. But adding referencing to cod in that particular area would not take anything from the main focus of the northern cod. But it is, to quote Mr. Small's comments, it is Canadian fish harvest concern there. And it keeps referencing his motion has ignored Canadian fish harvesters. That's what he's trying to do now with trying to constrain Madame Desbiens' motion.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Perkins.
Chair. And I appreciate, because we have cod all around Nova Scotia, and it was impacting the lobster fishery last December as well, because they are back in larger numbers. But it is the minister's decision, which is what the study is about, was about the specific move from 13,000 metric tons to 18,000 metric tons in 2J3KL, very specific cod fishing areas, and the agreement with NAFO that stems from those areas. It's not about the decision and the prompting of the study, and of course everything I'm sure government members know that has been discussed in public with the FFAW and all the processor and other industry groups is their concern about the decision of the minister on her announcement on 2J3KL, not about the entire cod fishery all over Atlantic Canada. So I believe that's why, and I would support a broader study beyond this. It would have to be more than 4 meetings if we were to go to a broader cod study in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, Nova Scotia, and other parts. I would support that, but we would have to add more meetings to do that. The 4 meetings specifically, as far as I'm concerned, and the motivation for it was about that specific decision by the minister. And that's why his preamble talked about what the minister did in her announcement.
Mr. Small.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. Morrissey's comment about Canadian fishermen. I think that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are Canadians, so stating Canadian fishermen in that motion, there's nothing wrong with it. But as my colleague Mr. Perkins just said, there are many cod stocks in Atlantic Canada and in Quebec. There's probably 3 or 4 different cod stocks recognized by science. But this study is to study northern cod because of the decision that was the terrible decision that was made in June. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Madame Debienne, do you want to comment?
Je pense que quelques...
I think that irrespective of the decision that will be taken, I would like to ask questions about the study on cod to have various clarifications that may have an impact on the codfish in the St. Lawrence River. And I would like to add that when it works for you, you involve Quebec. When it doesn't work for you, you exclude Quebec. So it's interesting to know that. I will insist on the fact that there is indeed a link, and I believe that there is one, and even in the future there would be a link depending on the decisions that will be made and the report that will be submitted after our study. If I do not have the approval of the rest of the committee, I would stop there and I will ask other questions that have to do with the St. Lawrence River and Quebec during the study, and I will be submitting my list of witnesses about that. I would have liked the committee to acknowledge the fact that codfish swims in water irrespective of the province.
I think we've got a good handle on what Madame Debienne was trying to do and feelings on it. I think it's time to actually vote on the sub-amendment, I'll call it, from Madame Debienne. I'll ask the clerk to ask for the vote.
Could you read that out again, please? Just her amendment one more time. Sorry.
I only have it in French.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I'm taking lessons. So here we
How's that
go.
working out for you?
A Glace Bay accent.
Perfect.
You write the script on it. Always a shot, eh? Always a shot. My God.
Hey,
Keeping the receipts on those.
hey, we're trying to do a vote here.
Donc, l'ajout de...
Addition by Ms. Debienne, it's after Newfoundland and Labrador. We add, and Quebec, which may have repercussions on the stocks in the St. Lawrence River.
The clerk to do the vote.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Hanley,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway,
Oui.
Mr. Morrissey,
Oui.
Mr. Arnold,
No.
Mr. Bragdon,
No.
Mr. Perkins,
No.
Mr. Small,
No.
Madame Desbiens,
Oui.
Miss Barron,
No.
Six yeas, 5 nays.
There you go. All right, so that'll be part of it.
Amendment of Mr. Kellaway.
Amend as the amendment to Mr. Kellaway's.
We did.
We did. Yeah. Yeah, we did, Ms. Barron's.
Show of hands, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, now the motion as amended.
We didn't vote on the amendment of Mr. Kellaway.
We didn't vote on the amendment by Mr. Kellaway?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, it's still a motion as amended by Mr. Kellaway.
Amendment.
Right, because now it is amended.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Barron.
Can I just get clarification? The sub-amendment that I brought forward has been passed? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on to MP Kellaway's amendment
As amended.
as amended.
Mr. Kellaway's motion as amended
As
by
amended. Okay, thank you.
various
Thank you.
persons along the way. Mr. Morrissey.
My request to speak on the amendment of Mr. Callaway's. Can I do that now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, Chair, I do want to speak to my colleague's sub-amendment, because when I go back to the main moment, I would hope that this committee would focus on how fishers are impacted by the decisions of the department and various ministers. Everybody knows, I don't have to repeat the famous quote of the dead minister, John Crosby, when he referenced, "I did not take your fish." He was more explicit than that. He was more explicit. So what we have over the years is the question should be, is government, and being the scientific bureaucracy of the department, why it has failed the fishing industry. The tone of this is, to me, appears to be simply more, I'll be candid, playing politics with just the visceral wording of the motion, and I would prefer that this committee focus on who should be the object of any study, which is the fishers, and they have every right to demand more from collective government. So we could reference 9 years, 6 fisher ministers. I could reference 8 years and one and a half minister. That the record there would probably be spotty as well and questionable. So if that's why I support Mr. Callaway's amendment, is to focus on who should be pointing fingers, as again Mr. Crosby said, and he was right. He was not the person that made the decisions that led to the decision he had to make. It was simply politicians, in a lot of cases, playing games, more interested in political posturing than in getting to the issue. And the issue should be, and I would hope that this committee would focus on the decisions and the degree and the substance of the data that the department is charged to get as it provides the advice to a minister on the management of the fishery. We do know, and it's clear, I've represented fishers for a long time, the pressure on every natural resource on Boat Coast is more than what the natural resource can sustain, appears to be. We increasingly advance the sophistication of our fishing fleet but still not looking clearly at what is happening with the stock. Nothing in here talks about something that the official opposition glosses over, climate change, the impact of climate change. I'm dealing with a situation now in my riding in oysters that everybody is pointing to the warming water that has given MSX why it exploded in the inland bays of Prince Edward Island. So that's with the wording of Mr. Small's motion as it is. I would not support it, simply because it's political grandstanding, and the focus should be on the fish harvesters, who, in a lot of cases, and I do not know, I do not have direct experience on the issue on the northern cod, but I take it first value that there was some, and should be some legitimate questions on some of the decisions made around there. So that's why, Mr. Chair, I would support the motion as amended and sub-amended a number of times, because it will allow the committee to focus on what it should be doing, is the management of the stock and the decisions that are being made. Simply throwing all in and referencing the particular government. We could insert Justin Trudeau with Stephen Harper, Jean Chrétien, Brian Mulroney, with a host. Yeah, you want to go back to Diefenbaker? Yeah. But the reality is where we're sitting, and I would hope that a government and a collective parliament would actually be focusing on the challenges that will continue to grow as it relates to the natural wild harvest on all coast. Because again, technology is equipping an industry with a fishing capacity that we don't know if the stock, through its natural growth, can sustain. We've done a number of studies in here, Mr. Chair, that it's questionable if some of these fishers in certain areas may ever fish again in our lifetime. So it is a valid, the intent of studying the decision around Nordic cod is a valid one. It's a valid one. It's one I agree with. This committee should put a decision like that under the scope of a public committee.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect to Mr. Morrissey, he referenced visceral. There's no visceral intent. Mr. Kellaway's motion removed, I think, what Mr. Morrissey would be framing as visceral, and I think we should get to the vote on this. It's very important to me as a former fisherman who was fishing when the moratorium was called, and my family was fishing, and many friends and relatives right throughout the province that were fishing in 1992. This is very offensive to them to see this motion being watered down and debated. Let's get it to a vote and get our study going so that we can bring in the stakeholders and the people that were involved in making this motion, making this decision to turn the stewardship fishery to a commercial fishery, and get them before this committee so we can get to the bottom of how this decision was made.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to the vote, I guess.
Zoom?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I could repeat all my comments that were made. They still speak to what should be the focus of this committee, which is the impact decisions made by government had on specific fisheries. That I agree with. It was the blatant political tone of the motion that really didn't do anything. So again, I have the right as a committee member to question what the objective was here. I want to focus it on the actual issue before, which is the future of the cod fishery on the East Coast, primarily to the north. That was identified, but Madame Desbiens wanted to expand it, which is fine. They're complementary. So that's why, Mr. Chair, I can support the motion, which is a valid motion that I would be interested in having witnesses appear before. As it was amended by Mr. Callaway, because it does bring the focus and the only focus on the issue at hand, which is the stock and the impact on the fishers. But I could not support the original motion as it was worded, because I, for one, in this committee, simply feel the interests of the fisher were not foremost in producing this original motion.
Okay, seeing no other hands up, I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
Mr. Long,
Support.
Mr. Hanley,
Support.
Mr. Hardy,
Oui.
Mr. Kellaway,
We.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Yay.
Mr. Bragdon,
Yay.
Mr. Perkins,
Yes.
Mr. Small,
Yes.
Madame Desbiens.
Écoutez, moi, je suis désolée, mais
I'm sorry. Are we voting on Mr. Callaway's motion, on the Conservatives' motion, the intervention, on Mr. Callaway's amendment? Yes.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Yes.
Great. Okay, that's done.
Now the motion.
Now the motion
As amended.
as amended has to be voted on. So I'll ask the clerk,
The amendment.
the amendment. The amendment. So now you got to do the main motion as amended. Yes, almost. close to it. I'll ask the clerk to,
Ms. Barron.
Ms. Barron,
Sorry, can you please just read out what we're voting on this time?
Merci.
I have no idea.
Yes, thank you.
We're voting on the main motion from Mr. Small
Me like
as
that.
amended.
As amended.
His motion amended the whole, his amendment amended the whole motion.
Is what we're voting on now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my thought.
Yes.
Yes, yes, as amended. And amended and amended. So I'll ask the clerk to record the vote, call for the vote.
Ms. Desbiens.
Start vote.
Okay. Mr. Long. Yes. Mr. Hanley.
Yes.
Mr. Hardy.
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway.
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Mr. Bragdon.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
Absolutely.
Mr. Small.
Yes.
Madame Desbiens. Oui. Ms. Barron.
Yes.
Done. Yeah, we got through a motion anyway. Mr. Arnold, you have your hand up, or were you just? I thought you were just waving a sheet of paper first.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the following motion, that the committee requests the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and Canadian Coast Guard to appear before the committee for no less than 2 hours within 14 days of the adoption of this motion in relation to her mandate and the current priorities for fisheries, oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Okay, we've all heard the motion. Any discussion? Yes, okay.
Monsieur
We'll
Chair.
suspend for a moment. So we've all heard the motion as presented by Mr. Arnold. Any discussion? Mr. Kellaway?
Mr. Kellaway. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll call you.
I also didn't say it's great to see everyone back after the summer. Look, I was going to put forward a motion with respect to this as well. The minister is available on October 9th. I'd like to put that forward as maybe there's a way to meld what has been put forward here and look at October 9th. Now, the 2 hours, we can certainly go back. I know she's committed to coming for an hour, but we can certainly look to see if she's available for 2. But I wanted to put that out there, and I'll yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Arnold?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kellaway. I had seen your motion, and we would be willing to accept October the 9th as a date for the minister to appear, but absolutely, we request that it be the minister for 2 hours. So if we need to amend the motion, instead of within 14 days, that the minister appear on October the 9th.
All right. Okay, is everybody okay with that amendment? All right, done. As amended. Now we'll vote on the motion as amended.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Hanley,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway,
Yes.
Mr. Morrissey,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Yes.
Mr. Bragdon,
Yes.
Mr. Perkins,
Yes.
Mr. Small,
Yes.
Madame Desbiens,
Oui.
Ms. Barron,
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion is carried that the minister will appear for 2 hours on October 9th. Somebody had their hand up. Who? Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion. We are in committee business, but since I didn't give advance notice, I'll read it out and then the clerk can circulate it to everyone. And if you guys want to take a few minutes to consider it after I read it.
Point of
the
order,
notice that
Mr.
my
Chair.
motion is that with regard to the media reports.
Mr. Hardy?
that-
Point of
Sorry,
order?
Rick, we are in public, we're not in committee business. And you need to, in public, you need to give notice of motion.
Actually, we are in committee business. We're just public committee business.
Is
What
that
have we
true?
been doing
Are we good?
publicly with
Yeah.
motions other than committee
Okay, no,
business?
I just needed some clarification on that. Carry on.
Okay, I'll start
Perkins, when
again.
you're
So, it's being circulated, I think, by email, but that with regard to the media reports that the former Minister of Fisheries ignored peace on the water accord between the Sibonacany First Nation and commercial fishermen in St. Mary's Bay, and given that in the years following, 1, organized crime has profited and flourished off the trade of unlicensed lobster harvesters, and 2, Acadian First Nation communities have been routinely terrorized around the Clare area through arson and violence, that the committee therefore agrees to hold 2 meetings to investigate why the minister ignored this agreement, and that the committee agreed to invite the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, her officials, the former chief of the Sibonacany First Nation, Mike Sack, and the president of the United Fisheries Conservation Alliance, Colin Sproul, and that these meetings begin following the completion of the cod study.
When you say the cod study, you mean the cod and the derelict vessel one,
Yes.
which will all.
Once that's done.
Okay.
And if I could speak to it for a moment. There were reports in the Chronicle Herald, and I have spoken to the fishing groups who also confirmed that the reports were correct, that in 2022, on the initiative of then Chief Mike Sack, he reached out to the fishing groups in southwest Nova Scotia to see if they could come to an accommodation, and they did. Some of those details were published in the report. That went up to the Minister of Fisheries and Minister of Fisheries number 5, who rejected the deal. So we had peace on the water agreed to at the initiative of First Nations, signed off by First Nations, and the minister rejected it. And I think we need to have a hearing to find out why that happened, when all of what we've been talking about for the last year or so here, whether it's the Elver fishery, the illegal lobster fishery, and some of the the motions that we've done today are outcomes of not signing that agreement for peace on the water between the two nations. So we proposed that we have a study, invite those witnesses, the signatories to that agreement, and departmental officials.
Is that being circulated? Yes. Okay, everybody got a copy?
Yep.
Any discussion?
Just if we could have just another moment to suspend, if possible, just to,
All right.
yeah, thank you.
Suspension seems to be the word of the day. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of this I agree with, and it's being ignored for too long. But there's a couple of areas. This current minister, I'm not sure could speak on the decision of a former minister. So that I would like to see officially. Was this agreement real or not real? It's an alleged agreement. I would like to see if it actually existed. So who do we address on that? And the other part that keeps getting swept under the rug here, Mr. Chair, on this cash and illegal is the regulatory role of the provinces, who license the buyers and the processors. Very difficult to have cash or illegal if the buyer is actually following the rules of who they should be buying from. You should be buying from authorized licensed fisheries, where you attach a slip to everybody knows the process. So if we can weave that into the motion of Mr. Perkins, there's a lot of good in here. I think we do have to examine it. We have in this committee ad nausea referenced the cash illegal on report that's going on. We've had excellent witness testimony on a number of areas. So all that I agree with where Mr. Perkins is going. But there's two parts of it. How do we, I'm not sure the current minister would be the person to speak to a decision that was made by a couple of years ago. And the other part is, as it relates to there, I would want to extend an invite to the government of Nova Scotia, the relevant ministry, to question in this committee what they're doing to control this within their scope of legislative authority, which is on the shore. The illegal that's referring to here, it's most of it does not occur on the water. It's when the product comes ashore, and then it's sold. That's right, but it's when it comes ashore, and then is moved into the marketplace in an illegal, unauthorized, unlicensed form. That's what we're getting to here. So there's two components. The federal government regulates the fishery on the water by and large, but as it relates to the buyer, the processor, it is the provinces. And we heard that here as well. So I agree with where you're going, but I would like to have before this committee all the relevant jurisdictions that have authority and find out what they're doing. To regulate here, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that. I'll start with the first part. The current minister is the sixth fisheries minister from this Liberal government. I agree. But she is answerable to everything the department has done during that time, not just her time in that. If she doesn't feel comfortable enough to defend everything her government has done in that job as fisheries minister, then why don't we add the former minister, number 5, Joyce Murray, to the list to address MP Morrissey? So I'm more than willing to have both of them here. Secondly, with regard to the province didn't negotiate the agreement. It was negotiated for peace on the water on the division of licenses and how the federal government would approach supporting First Nations going forward in the fishery with regard to licenses, boats, training, and fishing in a DFO regulated season. That's the agreement. The province was not at the table. That was between the First Nations and commercial fishermen and the Minister of Fisheries, who rejected the proposal. The province had nothing to do with analyzing whether or not Sibonactony should get more licenses, how they would get more licenses, and what support they would get. That was solely the discretion of the Minister of Fisheries. Number 5, if Minister number 6 isn't comfortable defending Minister number 5, let's have both of them.
Not seeing any more hands up. Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I was just rereading all the information around this. Got to keep up with a lot of things happening across the country here. Thank you to MP Perkins for bringing forward this important discussion. One thing I was going to ask is, I guess first thing is that if we do this study, I look forward to hearing more. It's clearly complex, and I'm reading through all the moving pieces on it, and it sounds like there's definitely some real solutions that need to be implemented, and always a good opportunity to hear from those who are impacted and to be able to recognize what those solutions are and to be able to actually see them moving forward. But I did want to ask that the motion that MP Perkins brought forward, if we could add at the end, it does end at after the COD study, if we can also incorporate the derelict vessel study that will be happening at the same time to ensure it's clear to all members of this committee the order of these studies.
Okay. Mr. Kellaway.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, apologies. Chair, if I could just propose a sub-amendment to add, in addition to the COD study, the derelict and abandoned vessel study. So it's a minor edit or addition to the motion, I should say.
Mr. Morrissey.
Well, one question is the committee has a mandate to study the Fishery Act, which is really the whole reason the committee exists. The Fishery Act, it's the primary piece of legislation that governs everything we do. It's up for review and has to come back. We had agreed to study. So where does it go in all this? Because the Fishery Act is paramount to everything that we're talking about. So if we're going to keep pushing it, we don't know the timeline on this particular Parliament. So I feel that's extremely important that the Fishery Act be able to be scheduled in to give a review, because now after 5 years, there is some tweaking that can be done to that act that is being requested by fishers. That's my only question. We're putting a lot in, and where does the Fishery Act sit in that?
Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe what is written in the act is that it be reviewed. It does not have to be this committee. It could be a Senate committee that does the review of the Fisheries Act. And earlier, I believe it was the clerk or the analyst stated that the review of the act was not immediate, so we had time to provide witnesses. What we're seeing here that I've only began to experience as time progressed in my 9 years now on this committee, that we have more and more urgent or emergency or crisis situation happening, and items come up that we need to study immediately on behalf of the fish harvesters and the stocks, the conservation of fish stocks, that it's becoming a more and more recurrent theme that there's an urgent issue that hasn't been dealt with. After 9 years on this committee, and I haven't tallied up how many reports we've done, and the government responses to those reports and action on those reports has not been respectful of the knowledge around this committee table or of the knowledge of the witnesses and harvesters that have come in and testified. So what we're seeing here is an urgent issue. It's a growing issue that Mr. Perkins has raised, and the Fisheries Act will continue. But there are, I believe, more pressing issues affecting our fish harvesters right now.
Madame Desbiens.
J'aimerais deux questions.
I have two questions. The review on the Fisheries Act, could you estimate the time that will take? An estimate based on what has obtained in the past. Could we have an idea of that? Because what my colleague is saying is true. There are major crises, major issues we have to look into, but there'll always be those issues. There'll always be a Fisheries Act that is coming up. We are always going to be dealing with very serious issues arising from the Act. So alarm bells are going off everywhere where there's water and fish to be fished. So on the calendar, I would like to know how we can think or look into the short, medium, or long-term future. I'm thinking about recreational fishing, other things that are also on the list. So I don't know how we can deal with the various emergencies. Even is it through the review of the Fisheries Act that we will find solutions, whereas there are urgent issues that have to be addressed? I agree that the reports that we submit are not always dealt with quickly. What we are hearing on the field, we spent the summer on the ground wherever there were fisheries. You have harvesters that are frustrated. So what could be the most efficient way for us to address the alarm bells that are going off everywhere in Canada and in Quebec? So my question, what is our calendar to review this Fisheries Act? How much time will this take? Not forgetting all the emergencies that are arising, can we come up with some kind of a program that we all agree on, and then we add other urgent issues as we progress with the Fisheries Act? Because I believe that we'll always have to deal with all these other urgent issues.
Okay, please.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. First of all, when I was bringing forward us adding onto this motion the point around adding the derelict and abandoned vessels to the completion of the COD study and derelict and abandoned vessels. If I could be honest, I was maybe taking it a little bit too literally, because it says begin following the completion of those studies. In my mind, we would have an additional discussion around how that works out in the timeline. I didn't see immediately following the completion, and so whether it should be immediately following or not, I'm still not 100% sure of, to be honest. And the reason is because of many of the questions that my colleague, Madame Desbiens, was just asking. What I don't understand is, and some of the pieces that I'm going to be doing some further research and having conversations around is around this act when we're reviewing it, how much time is required in order for us to actually see the implementation of the recommendations that are coming forward? How does that work as a committee to see that this work is going to be used effectively and actually carried through? We know none of us, and I will say it, none of us know when an election is going to happen, but we certainly know it's going to happen within a year. And so do we even have enough time if we go to the full term of what is possible to complete this? The other thing is that I agree with my colleague, Mr. Arnold, that there has been many things coming forward that are urgent in nature. It seems that, how can you disagree with so many of the things that are coming forward at this committee around how important they are? I do think, though, we need to be taking a moment to look at this act, if it's effective for us to do that in this timeline that we have, because I do think it's interconnected with many of these issues. If we have an outdated Fisheries Act, we're going to see the trickle impacts coming through in many of these emergency motions. So I do prefer as a committee that we're taking a moment to recognize the bigger picture here and recognize that many of the things we're talking about can be talked about when we're reviewing the Act as well, because there's many components that are linked. But so I need to understand, if we study the Act, will we actually see that work being carried forward into fruition within the timeline that we have remaining? And that once I have that information, then I can provide my input on the timeline of how these studies will move forward.
Mr. Kellaway. Oh, okay, Mr. Arnold. Sorry, and then you and Ken.
Yeah, I was just ahead of you, Mike, just ahead of you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make small amendments in consideration of what MP Barron has said, that the end of the motion read that, and these meetings begin immediately following the COD and derelict vessel study. So remove the words "the completion," because otherwise we would have to wait until the report is completely finished to begin. We could do it while we're waiting for version 1, version 2. Okay. Does everyone understand that? So that it would read, and that these meetings begin immediately following the COD and derelict vessels study. Pardon me?
The Fisheries Act would
No,
be
I'm
done
talking
after.
to Mr. Perkins' motion.
Oh, okay. There's a timetable for the Fisheries Act to be done as well. Mr. Kellaway and then Mr. Hardy.
Yeah. So I'm going to entertain Mel's sub-amendment in a second. But I do think, with respect to the two studies, I think it's clear for me how that's going to unfold. I really do think that the study of the Fisheries Act is really critical. And look, there's no question that over the last number of years, there have been very many challenges with respect to the fishery on both coasts, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it is environmental, and some of it transcends in other ways. But for me, the Fisheries Act and having the ability of all members and all parties coming to strengthen the Fisheries Act, which will hopefully triage some of the challenges that we have and turn them into hopefully opportunities, but at least provide some solace on the water and on the ground is really, really important. So I want to transition from that just to some of the other things that were mentioned. With respect to MP Perkins' motion, the spirit of it I agree with. I do think, and even though, and I think Mr. Perkins put it very succinctly, that the province wasn't involved in a potential agreement, I do think that we need to do more around this committee of bringing in, I think we've done this with Newfoundland and Labrador to a degree, but I think we need to bring in the province on a lot of these items. And that's not to say the federal government has zero responsibility. We have a major responsibility to the steward of the fishery, but the province has as well. And a lot of the challenges that we have, it's easy to look at it as a simply political, which we all do. But we also need to look at it as practical. There is a huge connection to the provincial governments in terms of cash sales, as Mr. Morrissey mentioned. I think we need to incorporate that in a lot of our motions going forward. The third thing is around Sibonacady. I do feel somewhat uncomfortable not including Chief and Counsel, the current Chief and Counsel, in any discussions with respect to a potential study. And I think that's really important. I think that there's a process and protocol that we need to be mindful of, and we should look at that as well. But I'll just sum up by saying this. I know we can't, once again, invent more time, but we do also have a subcommittee. We may want to look at that subcommittee to look at how do we parse out a schedule that really takes into account, as Mr. Perkins said, the most immediate challenges with the fishery, but at the same time, look at the Fisheries Act. The Fisheries Act is a huge tool. It's a huge opportunity for us to strengthen, what is happening on the water. And I'll leave it at that, but I'm very concerned that we're seemingly pushing the Fisheries Act down the road and kicking the can. And I do think, yes, the Senate can review it and most likely will. But I think it would be negligence if we don't do it ourselves. I think it would be wrong. We are the elected officials here. Thank you.
Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's interesting absorbing all of the nuances coming across in the various commentaries. The Fisheries Act is kind of like a football, a political football in some respects. It gets kicked around a lot. But if you had a picture of it, it would be covered with Band-Aids, as over 9 years we've looked at this issue, then this issue, then this issue. And it would appear that everything from major policy right through to how the DFO allocates its time needs a good shaking out. I don't think this is the sort of thing that we should leave to the Senate. And I honestly don't think it's a good thing to leave to any future parliament. I think that, there's a lot of, corporate learning here that, some of it isn't going to be around the next time around. And we need to, I think it's time that we go back. I forget who made the, the point. A couple of people made the point that, we've done some really, really good studies here. And I am among probably most of us who are underwhelmed by what kind of action we've seen from the DFO. So I think, yes, it's always going to be something, as Gilda Radner would say, but I think we need to really get down to the foundation of this thing and start to build something that's going to be much more proactively involved in dealing with a very changing landscape. Be it fish stocks, be it climate change behind the fish stock, be it all of the social, cultural issues that we're running into, be it the fact that our fishery on the West Coast has collapsed, basically, and it used to be the source of such community pride and cultural and identity and everything else. The Fisheries Act does need a good shaking out, and yeah, sure, the current one, absolutely worthy, but it's an example of yet another Band-Aid being asked to put on a football that's leaking air like crazy, and one more good kick, and I think the thing is going to pop. So let's not lose sight of, I think, the responsibility that we have, especially with, people like Mel and I who've invested 9 years in this thing, to actually, come out of this Parliament with, with a Fisheries Act that's far better tuned up to the challenges that we have now, and especially the ones that are coming.
Chair, I agree with my colleague. This is the committee that's designated under the legislation to review the Fishery Act. There's reference to the Senate as well, but for this committee, the elected committee, to have the appointed committee review the act, I think we would be sidestepping our responsibility as a committee. I agree with the studies that have been put forward. In fact, the one that we last discussed here, motion of Mr. Perkins, is very, very timely. But if we're simply going to keep delaying the Fishery Act and then run out of time, then, Mr. Chair, I think as a committee, it would disappoint me because, like yourself and Mr. Arnold and Mr. Hardy, we were the original members of the committee that reviewed the current act, and it was extensive. It was in the early days. I forget the exact timeline on it, but that act now needs to do it justice, should come back to the committee to seek input from fishers across on both sides on changes that can be made, because a lot of the issues that we're dealing with are governed through the Act and by the Act. So we had this discussion in the spring of the year, I believe, or some time ago, when I made the motion to bring the Fishery Act to committee for review. It was sometime last winter, I believe, or last spring, and it kept getting delayed. And each one of these are valid issues that should be discussed and valid motions. In fact, I'm very interested in all of them. But where we're going as it relates to the Fishery Act, I'm confused at this moment because I don't. Maybe we accept the position put forward by Mr. Callaway that we have the subcommittee take a look at what's on it. Yes, we could reduce. I believe the motion. Am I correct? Could the clerk inform the committee how many studies days were attached to the fishery?
8 meetings.
How many?
8.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could, if we got together, we could move some of them down. The one part that and she may be able to speak to, that I didn't fully understand, Ms. Barron, is the relationship between derelict vessels and the fishery. I know what it is from a transport perspective, but, pardon? The derelict vessel study, the relation of derelict vessels as it relates to the fishery.
Point of order, that's not relevant to the motion before us.
That's fine. Mr. Chair, I will go back. It was just, I wasn't sure on that. But the Fishery Act is the one that is very relevant to this particular committee. And I would like to know where we're going.
Point of order. I realize we only have 4 minutes left and we're going over the same ground again, and I understand that the government doesn't want to hear from First Nations about why they rejected their study, but can we get on with it? This is 2 meetings that somehow government members are confused that this will delay some magical study of the Fisheries Act. Why don't they want to hear from First Nations about why the government rejected Peace on the Water? Let's get on with it and vote.
Mr. Callaway.
Well, that's a hard act to follow, so I'm not going to try. Look, I think we need to look at some practical ways here of moving forward. Again, we met, I think, once, maybe, as a subcommittee. I don't know if you see value in that in terms of trying to find some common ground here with respect to several studies that are very, very important. I want to go back, though. I mean, I think it bears repeating that I know back home. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. The 2-minute warning? Thank you very much. Thank you. I know my folks back home, those that are in the fishery, are very eager to present to this committee in terms of the Fisheries Act and to strengthen it where it needs to be strengthened. I suspect the same is for all of you. While at the same time, as MP Arnold mentioned, there are many challenges that pop up on a given day, let alone week or month. But I look at the Fisheries Act to some degree as an engine that can help in terms of addressing the long-term challenges and maybe even the midterm challenges of what we face. Again, I think that this committee, and I've been here now 3 years, and I know MP Arnold and MP Hardy and MP Morrissey have been here for 9 years on this committee. I think that we've done a really good job as committees of not really going down the ideological partisan road. If we're looking at, if we are...
Point of order by Mr. Small.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Kellaway is misleading in thinking that Conservatives don't want to study the failed 2019 Fisheries Act. We're not trying to not study it. We simply want a couple of meetings to study the opportunity that was laid out before his government, is NDP Liberal government, to try to get peace on the water. And there was an agreement between commercial and Indigenous fishers to have an agreement that his former boss denied him. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I can continue?
Well, you got about 30 seconds.
Okay. With all due respect to Mr. Small, you don't know what Mike Kellaway's thinking, but thanks and nice try. I believe that you and all of you want, and I said this if you look at the transcript, want to focus on the Fisheries Act. But it's this partisan style of approach that doesn't help anybody one damn bit.
All right, well, that pretty well comes to the end of our 2 hours for today. And I know it was mentioned a couple of times, and I just want to make a comment as chair, to get the subcommittee together. We've done that in the past. We come back here and it gets butchered. Right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So as far as I'm concerned, we do it as is sent to us from the House if it's something got to be dealt with by the committee, or by motions that are made by individual members to study certain topics. And all I will say from the prospect of the subcommittee, everyone in that committee agreed to do derelict vessels next kind of thing. And it keeps getting shoved down the road, which even when we recess for the summer, the commitment was we would do derelict vessels when we get back in the fall. And it just, it gets pushed down, right? And I think that's wrong, right?
The IUU study that took 3 parliaments to get to?
Yeah, that was another one. But we did get to it, and we did get it done. But the derelict vessels, a number of members here committed to Ms. Barron that would be first business to be done when we come back in the fall. And look where we're to now. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.